What is up, and welcome back to Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. As always, I am your host, Brandon Silvers. Hope y'all are doing well. You'll be doing even better if you subscribe, rate, review, and share this. Let's hurry up and get into today's show, just in case the Supreme Court overturns me. Okay, I feel like I always do this when it comes to the NBA, as the playoffs are winding down and my sleep schedule is just wrecked because of the West Coast games. I'm like, all right, let's hurry up and get this over with. And then when it's over with, I miss it dearly and I get this big rush of NBA energy. And a lot of that energy is fueled by the NBA offseason, which is unlike any other sport in this country. The WNBA is certainly getting close in terms of big moves, pettiness, and the draft becoming an event in and of itself, but the NBA still holds the throne for the time being. My favorite thing about the NBA offseason is overreacting. I love to overreact. It's awesome. And the NBA creates the perfect environment for this. The game looks just easy enough to understand on TV that everyone thinks they're a great talent evaluator, and it's great. You can just fire off hot takes and nobody knows whether you're right or wrong for quite some time, and they'll probably forget whatever dumb thing you said because you've moved on to your next hot take. It's the perfect time to be theoretically correct. For instance, the draft just happened, and I already know who made the right pick and who didn't. Nobody's even played a game in this league yet. Free agents can't sign contracts until the 6th, but I already know who did and didn't make the right moves. Think I'm wrong? Prove it. Now, I will be evaluating specific moves and letting y'all know what I think about those, so don't worry. But before I drop that, I want to get out in front of everyone else and drop my biggest offseason overreactions. Really step into the sports media leadership role and give the industry their talking points for the rest of the summer. That's why I'm the greatest. So without further ado, my first offseason overreaction is that the super team as a strategy to win an NBA title is dead. Sorry, Suns fans. If you think about it, was it ever really alive? Let's look at those Heatles back in the day. LeBron, D. Wade, Chris Bosh. 3 guys who had been number 1 options on their respective teams before teaming up. LeBron was at his peak, the best in the game. D. Wade was a top 2 shooting guard. Chris Bosh, a literal dinosaur, was a 24-11 guy his last season in Toronto. The only other guys who averaged 20 and 10 that season were Zach Randolph and David Lee. What a year. They got together and it was supposed to be the end of the NBA as we knew it. Until it wasn't. They lost that first year to Dirk, JJ Barea, and the Dallas Mavericks, but they did win back-to-back titles before losing to the Spurs and disbanding as LeBron went back to Cleveland. When you think about it, they were a Ray Allen miracle and Tim Duncan missed Bunny away from being 1-3 in those 4 years together. 2 rings is fantastic, but when you consider all that talent they had, how would you label it? Overachieving, underachieving, or just achieving? I'd say they did the bare minimum of what they needed to do by winning 2 championships to not be considered a complete flop. Certainly not a ringing endorsement for the super team concept. LeBron probably gets one of those rings himself if he just stays in Cleveland. Which brings us to our next super team, the welcome back LeBron Cleveland Cavaliers. You've got LeBron, still near the height of his powers, a young, almost normal Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Love, who they got from Minnesota for the number 1 pick because LeBron wanted to win now. Love was just coming off of a 26-13 season, although those were probably empty calorie stats, but still, that's something. Year 1 wasn't a complete failure. They made it to the finals where they lost to the Warriors in 6 games. Kelly Olynyk had did some white-on-white crime earlier in the playoffs, so Kevin Love was out for the series. Then Kyrie got hurt in game 1 of the finals. LeBron was out there hoping Matthew Dellavedova and Timofey Mozgov, Lakers legend, could get the job done. And honestly, LeBron was incredible, but again, Timofey Mozgov was the Cavs' 2nd leading scorer in the series. But hey, stars aligned for the Warriors. Cavs were unlucky, and they were also coached by David Blatt. I still struggle to say Timofey Mozgov because Timofey is just not rolling off my tongue. But also, as a Lakers fan, I think back to that contract we gave him because of this series, and I can't do it. It hurts. Anyways, next season, they're healthier. They get a new coach midway through the season in Ty Lue. But for a super team, they weren't even close to having the best record in the league. No, that belonged to the Supernova Warriors, who we all know won a record 73 games that year. Even the Spurs won 67. But they were still the number one seed in the East, and they pulled off the most incredible comeback in NBA history when they defeated that Warriors team in Game 7 after being down 3-1. This experiment was a success based on this alone, but they weren't even really a super team at this point anymore. And they certainly weren't after the series, because Draymond hopped on the phone with Kevin Durant, and now the Warriors were the new super team in town. The Cavs made it back to the finals 2 more years, but only won 1 game total in both of those series. So for that super team, you've got 4 years, 4 trips to the NBA finals, and 1 championship. Again, not an overwhelming success by any means, but that 1 championship they did get was incredible. So let's move on and look at that KD Warrior super team. Steph was an MVP and had revolutionized the game with his 3-point shooting powers, the greatest shooter we have ever seen. His teammate Klay Thompson was the 2nd greatest shooter we'd ever seen and one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. KD was KD, and Draymond Green was at his peak playmaking, defending, and dick-kicking powers. They wasted no time winning back-to-back championships in their first 2 seasons together, and it probably would have been a three-peat, but Klay and KD suffered devastating injuries against the Raptors in their final season together in the NBA Finals. Then KD got tired of Draymond calling him a bitch, and he left. Jordan Poole says it could have been worse. Now, this Warriors super team was certainly successful, but did they even need to add KD to do all that? I mean, Steph had struggled in the finals up to this point, but let us never forget that this was a 73-win team we're talking about, who added an MVP in their prime to their roster. But again, a success, and also the last super team to win a title. So what do we have? For teams with 3 superstars, aka super teams, 11 seasons together, and they made the finals in all 11 seasons, but only 5 championships. And that's not even counting the failed super teams. Brooklyn has really cornered the market on this one, trying it first with old-ass Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett and Darren Williams, and then again with Durant, Kyrie, and James Harden. Then they tried it again with Ben Simmons instead of James Harden, and wouldn't you know it, that didn't work either. Then Phoenix tried to make something shake by trading for Durant and having him play with Chris Paul and Devin Booker. That clearly didn't work out either, so they moved Paul for Bradley Beal, and don't even get me started on the super duos. The super team concept has only worked with either LeBron James, who is one of the greatest players ever, or 2 of the greatest shooters ever in Kevin Durant. If that's the level of talent it takes, and even then it only works less than half the time, then is it really worth it, or is it even that great of a concept? Instead of blowing through all your money and future first-round picks trying to build your own super team, try to get 1 actual superstar and surround him with the right complementary pieces. Now, I know what you're saying, but Brandon, how do I find my own superstar? I'm not legendary executive Jerry West. Yeah, no shit you aren't, but there are plenty of ways to find your superstar. In fact, you do it the exact same way you build a super team, just 2 fewer times. What you really need to know is how not to find your superstar. Which brings me to my next offseason overreaction. Tanking is the worst strategy for finding a superstar player. How do I know this? Well, here I am sitting atop the sports media world, and do you know what a popular piece of content is in this industry? Redrafts. Let's redraft the 2017 NBA draft. Who should have been picked where, now that we know how everyone turned out? You want to know why that is? Because everyone is bad at drafting at the top of the draft. Your dumb GM is thinking, hey, let's lose some games so we get a high draft pick, then we'll draft our franchise player. But he doesn't know what he's doing, so now, boom, bunch of redraft podcasts. How about some quick NBA trivia? Who was the last number 1 pick to win a championship for the franchise that drafted them to be their franchise player? If we're using loopholes, then it's LeBron, but he left Cleveland and came back. Non-loophole division, Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan entered college months before Michael Jordan's first retirement. I was 4 years old. Is the number 1 pick too narrow of a criteria? Okay, let's do top 5 pick. Top 5 pick who was the number 1 option on a championship winning team. Dwayne Wade. Exactly. It just doesn't work like that. The Sixers tanked so well, they gave it a name, and they still haven't been out of the second round. Expecting everyone to draft a generational talent during a Taco Bell commercial like the Nuggets did is unreasonable. But let's look at some guys. Giannis, 15th overall pick. Steph, 7th pick, shout out to the Timberwolves. Kawhi, 15th pick. Duncan, Shaq, MJ, and Hakeem Olajuwon had a hell of a run for top 3 picks, but since Duncan's last Finals MVP in 2005, only 3 different top 5 picks have won a Finals MVP. That even shocked the hell out of me. I was just trying to do a top pick thing, then I found that and I felt even smarter. I could definitely be a GM. We make fun of the Heat, at least I do, for going dumpster diving to put together a team, and while it is hilarious that they've been rumored to get every superstar since LeBron left and have gotten exactly 0 of them, they certainly prove that draft position doesn't matter nearly as much as people want you to think. Honestly, the Nuggets won it this year with a pretty similar makeup. Of the top 10 picks on their roster, Aaron Gordon, KCP, and Jeff Green are all role players, and they all came from other teams. They have no homegrown top 5 picks, and the only homegrown top 10 pick is Jamal Murray, who's one of the best second options in the league. You clearly need a superstar to win in this league, but why is it so hard to pick one? Well, there are so many different factors that go into a player's ability to become a franchise player: skill, health, work ethic, potential, personality, etc., that it's always been tough to pick them. And as I said in my draft episode a couple weeks ago, it's only getting harder. Players are coming into the league from all over the place. They're coming in less developed, so organizations have to project out potential even more, which is the hardest thing to project. There also seems to be a considerable overlap between franchises that think tanking is a good strategy and poorly run franchises. So now you have young potential superstars stuck on teams who aren't great at development. But what about the Spurs, the best run franchise of the last 25 years, who have drafted and developed a number 1 pick in Tim Duncan, late first rounders like Tony Parker, and guys nobody had ever heard of like Manu Ginobili, who was the second to last pick in his draft? Didn't they just tank for their next franchise-altering superstar in Victor Wembanyama, the best prospect since LeBron James? They sure did. And that brings me to my next offseason overreaction. I'm not sold on Victor Wembanyama. Now, the Spurs are quite possibly the only franchise I trust to get Big Vic where he needs to be. Like I said, they know how to identify and develop talent. They love the French for some reason, and if they had any more big old women with churro recipes handed down for centuries to help Vic put on much needed weight, Zion would have demanded a trade there yesterday. I'm not nearly as concerned as I would be if it were like the Timberwolves or someone else. And Vic certainly has all the tools to become a generational player. I mean, he's an absurd 7'4" with an even more ridiculous 8-foot wingspan, and he can handle the ball and play on the perimeter, which makes him unlike anything we've ever seen. A lot of guys over 7 feet tall are clunky athletes, but Vic is smooth and coordinated. And when you watch him move, it's almost like it's CGI'd. His jumper isn't consistent yet, but it certainly looks like it's just a matter of time, and he also appears to be able to defend in this current iteration of the league. Okay, so what's the problem? Well, for starters, freakishly tall Frenchman with go-go gadget arms makes me think of Rudy Gobert. But he also weighs somewhere between 210 and 230 pounds. That means that during COVID, which Rudy started, I weighed more than Victor Wembanyama currently weighs, and I'm like 6'1". Even at my new weight, a clearly ripped 195 pounds, I could bench press him if necessary, although I do admit that would be awkward for the both of us. And while he does look CGI when he moves on the court, he also looks like he could blow away at a moment's notice. You're just not supposed to be that tall, you're certainly not supposed to be that skinny, and that's just out here living regular life. So I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around him playing an NBA season and staying injury-free. I know the team he's had around him is hyper aware of this as well and has special training protocols for him as a result, but our bodies are our bodies, and training can't fix everything. If it could, I'd be an Olympic champion in the 100 and 200. Sorry for disappointing you, Coach Herbert Johnson of the Herbert Johnson Track and Field Academy. We know more about human physiology now than we ever have, but it's hard for me to look at a guy his size and not think of Yao Ming, Rick Smits, George Mirasan, and Kenny George, all giants whose careers ended early due to injury. Along those same lines, it's hard for me to look at a guy that skinny and think he'll actually be strong enough to not only not get injured, but also be effective in this league. Now, we have seen guys get stronger and put on weight after getting to the NBA and just getting older. Skinny guys like KD, Giannis, and Steph have all done it. You're exposed to the best of the best in every aspect, so it's not a huge surprise you develop physically. But again, 7'4". The same thing that makes him such a tantalizing prospect is the same thing that also gives me pause. Freakishly tall and skinny guys normally stay freakishly tall and skinny. And adding weight can increase the risk for injury too if it's not done correctly. Again, if any organization is going to do this right, it's going to be the Spurs. But all this is as unprecedented as Vic is himself. The highlights look great and he's been great in interviews, but I'm just not entirely sure yet. I got to see it to believe it. And another reason why I'm not entirely sold on him yet actually ties in to my next offseason overreaction. You cannot win a championship if your big man doesn't play in the post. This sounds like a boomer take, and you can tell I grew up on 90s basketball, but hear me out. Similar to my super team argument, how many times has a big guy who didn't play primarily out of the post led his team to a championship? Wouldn't Jokic. He can shoot threes, but he led the league in post-ups this past season. Hakeem Olajuwon says he's the only guy in today's game who plays at a high level out of the post, and me and Hakeem can't both be wrong. Dirk might be the next name that pops into your head. Again, an all-time great three-point shooter, but he played before the three-point revolution, so he only took 2.3 threes per game the year they won the championship. 2.3. His go-to move was his iconic fadeaway, and how did he set that up? By posting up. No big guy has done it without primarily posting up. Anthony Davis has probably come the closest, and that's the last time anybody could depend on Anthony Davis's jump shot because he left it in a Disney World hotel room. Why is this the case? I thought Karl Anthony Towns changed the game. Well, when you're a big man playing out on the perimeter, your advantage is being able to shoot over shorter players. That's great, and 3 is worth more than 2, but there are so many more advantages closer to the basket. For starters, you can still see over your defender to score, and you're closer, so there's a higher percentage of it going in. Also, you're more likely to get fouled, which are easy points, and obviously your opponents racking up fouls is good for you too. You're also in better position to get an offensive rebound, and if you do miss, your miss is less likely to turn into a fast break for the other team than if you had missed a three-pointer. On top of that, if you can operate from the post, it changes how the defense has to play and makes it easier for you to find teammates who can hit threes. Jokic does this as good as anybody, but this is actually how Olajuwon and the Rockets won championships in the mid-90s. They'd come down, throw it into Hakeem. If you send an extra defender to help, you're leaving Kenny Smith, Sam Cassell, Mario Elie, Robert Horry, or Vernon Maxwell wide open. Good luck with that. Don't get me wrong, having a big who can shoot the three is a great weapon to have, but get your big ass down in the post and go to work. There are way more good things that can happen down there, which actually ties into my final offseason overreaction for now. I'm out on teams that use the three-pointer as their primary weapon on offense. Look, I know the analytics crowd loves the three, and I'd shoot 30 a game myself if I was playing, but those analytics are based off of large sample sizes, 82 games. Do you know what the biggest enemy of statistics is? Small sample sizes. You know what a small sample size is? A 7-game series. It's incredibly easy for the best three-point shooters to have a bad 4 games in a 7-game series and lose, especially when it's at the end of a very long season and your legs aren't always under you like they may have been back in February. I'm going to call this the James Harden theory since he's made a career out of doing this in the playoffs. His series with the Celtics this past year was a great illustration. They lost a tough 7-game series, and James shot a very respectable 35% on 7 3-point attempts per game, which is not bad until you break it down. In 3 of those games, he shot a combined 14 for 25 from 3. That's awesome. The other 4, he was 3 for 24. That's disgusting. The Warriors we were talking about before have been the only team to pull off winning championships using the three-pointer as their preferred weapon on offense, and they did so by having 2 of the best three-point shooters of all time. If your team has 2 of the best three-point shooters of all time, then I guess go for it. If not, and you want to win in the playoffs, get closer to the hoop. That can be in the paint like Giannis, LeBron, and Jokic, or from the mid-range like Kawhi and KD. Again, the three-pointer is a great weapon to have. I watched the Lakers not be able to shoot them in the first half of the season, so trust me, I know. But it should be a secondary weapon come playoff time. Okay, so I just hit y'all with a lot, and I don't want to overwhelm y'all, so let those sink in. This has been another episode of Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. Appreciate you watching, listening, rating, reviewing, subscribing, and sharing. And I will catch y'all next week.